Epaphroditus. What a man of God this man was. We've been looking at the book of Philippians, the second chapter. Today we're going to pick up in verse number 27. But the Apostle Paul is talking about an amazing man of God. His name was Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus was the messenger that the Apostle Paul used between the church of Philippi and himself as he's in jail in the city of Rome. Epaphroditus was actually from the city of Philippi, and so he knew the city and he knew the believers. The name Epaphroditus is only mentioned twice in the New Testament, and it's mentioned only in the book of Philippians. But we see here in this study the tremendous relationship of Epaphroditus to the Apostle Paul. He calls him my fellow worker. He calls him my brother. He calls him my fellow warrior, my fellow fighter. And so the Apostle Paul and Epaphroditus had a tremendous, tremendous relationship. Now we're going to pick up in verse number 27. You see, what happened is the Epaphroditus has become sick. And because he's become sick and he's heard that the church in Philippi knows that he's sick, he's got this longing, this desire, this deep down desire to go and to let them know that he's all right. But now notice what verse number 27 says, because there's some wonderful thinking in this verse. For indeed he was sick to the point of death. How many of you know that when you're sick to the point of death, you're sick? The Epaphroditus was not just having some little cold. He was sick to the point of death. Now what we believe is that he had expended himself so much in the bringing of this offering from Philippi to Rome. He had expended and used himself up so much that he has become sick, and it was a sickness to the point of death. Now notice what he says, but God had mercy on him. Let me just say this. God had mercy on Epaphroditus. What is mercy? It's pity. It's looking down at something with pity. You see, we need to understand that God is a gracious God. God operates and uses his faith so that we can be well. But we also need to understand that God looked down on Epaphroditus with pity. He looked at this man of God who's expended himself, and he looked on him with pity. Now notice the next phrase that the Apostle Paul says. He says, and not on him only, but also on me. What's Paul saying? It was the mercy of God that reached out to this man of God. And it wasn't just for Epaphroditus, but it was for me. And we see in these words the tremendous dependency that the Apostle Paul had on this man by the name of Epaphroditus. Paul depended on him. He depended on him to continue the work. He depended on him to continue to help him, to continue to fight with him. Not fight against him, but fight with him, stand with him in a fight. He was dependent on him as a brother in the Lord. And then he goes on in verse number 27, and he says at the end, so that I would not have sorrow upon sorrow. Let me just say something to you. People say that Christians shouldn't have sorrow. Well, somebody needs to inform the Apostle Paul of that. What did he say? He said, so that I would not have sorrow upon sorrow. What is Paul saying? Paul's saying that God's mercy intervened for Epaphroditus. And because of that, I no longer am going to have sorrow upon sorrow. In other words, Epaphroditus didn't die. But if Epaphroditus had died, I would be in a place of sorrow. Do you understand that? So if someone says to you, all Christians shouldn't sorrow, you know what? Go tell them to take a long walk off a short pier. Now, just tell them you're wrong. There is a time in the life of believers in which we sorrow. And Paul verifies that in verse number 27. Now let's move on to verse number 28. Therefore, I have sent him all the more eagerly, so that when you see him again, you may rejoice, and I may be less concerned about you. What's Paul saying? Hey, Epaphroditus is coming. He's coming. I'm sending him to you. I'm sending him to you so that you can see with your eyes the mercy of God, so that you can see what God's done, how God has spared the life of this man. He says that you might rejoice, that you might have joy, that you might have joy that's not conditioned on what's going on around you, but that on the inside of you, you can have this inward contentment, this joy, so that you could have joy, so that you could rejoice, that I may be less concerned about you. What's Paul saying? Epaphroditus is going to come back to me, and he's going to bring a report. And his report is, Paul, you really don't have anything to be concerned about. The church at Philippi is doing great. So what does Paul say then in verse number 29? Receive him then in the Lord with all joy. Receive him with joy. Receive this messenger, this man of God, this man who's laid his life down for the sake of the church at Philippi. Receive him with all joy and hold him in high regard. In other words, hold him in high respect. Let me tell you something. If Paul is telling the Philippians, to hold Epaphroditus in respect, we as believers need to hold this man in respect. And then the last, verse number 30, because he came close to death for the work of Christ. What do we believe? We believe that because of the work that he was doing for the Lord, that he had expended himself and had become close to the point of death because he was working for Jesus, risking his life to complete what was deficient in your service to me. What's he talking about? I believe that he's talking about that offering that the church at Philippi had sent to the Apostle Paul. Thank you for watching us today. God bless you. Join us again tomorrow.